Imagine this. Imagine somebody who you think does the same thing repeatedly. No matter how many times they apologize for their actions, imagine someone who cannot be helped by anybody, no matter how much support comes their way. Even if it was someone's life on the line, imagine someone who still doesn't care. Imagine somebody who you think could never change. Now, imagine this. Now imagine the religious community. So many religious people have come up and have such great pride. The idea is that we are the most holiest and we are the most godlike. The people that suggest this have the same value as those who are the same as a sinner. They are the same as a sinner. The value is the same. Those who act religiously and speak of their church attendance are the exact same individuals who commit sin. One of the fundamental problems with religious communities is pride, but the biggest is that they exclude people who aren't religious. They exclude people who aren't saved. They exclude those who have not yet heard the word in its full truth and stay far away. The whole idea of religion now stands as a way of showing how much of a good person you are. Do you do the sign of the cross? Do you give a certain percentage of your income to the poor? Do you give money to the church? Religion has now become a building filled with faithful people when they're inside, but when they go outside, they aren't the same people who are listening. They aren't the same people who are praying and showing love. The whole idea of who goes to heaven and hell now has become a competition of how many good deeds you do and how religious you are. Now, this story is about a man who wasn't religious. This man was seen as an animal with no feelings and was a boy of mischief. People like to point their finger at you and suggest that you'll be the same guy in 10 years. Do not listen. Religion has made it crystal clear that you need to abide. But this short sermon was just to tell you about a man who seemed like he wasn't going to change, but Christ has changed him. If Christ could change a man that seemed impossible, then Christ can fix your impossible. Now, we begin on the island of Puerto Rico. Nicky Cruz was born on 6th of December 1938. His father was one of the feared men on the island, who would later turn to spiritualism to make a living after being wounded in World War II, and a mother who would cooperate with him as a medium. Cruz's family was a base for voodoo, seances, and sorcery. Hundreds of people would go to the home to take part in the meditation sessions and all kinds of things. They considered the family home the witch's house for all the witchcraft that was inside. Many of the visitors that would come in and try to talk to departed spirits take part in sorcery and ask the father to deliver them from demons. One early morning, Nicky and his brother Jean would slip out of bed to see that two men brought an afflicted woman to the family home. Nicky and Jean would peek through the door as they stretched her on the long table. She was twitching and moaning as the two men held her down at each end of the table. Nicky's mother stood at her feet with her eyes raised, speaking strange words. Nicky's father was in the kitchen and returned with a small black urn filled with burning incense. He also had a frog which he placed on the woman's stomach. Then, as he was doing this, he would suspend the urn over her head with a small chain and sprinkle powder. The father would then command the evil spirits to depart and enter into the frog. Nicky and Jean trembled in fear. The woman would throw her head back and scream. The frog jumped off her stomach and smashed itself against the doorsill. She twisted free from the men and kicked with her legs. She rolled off the table and fell down to the ground. There was blood drooling from her mouth. The father pronounced her cured. When she became quiet, the men gave Nicky's father money. The men picked her up and praised the father. They praised him as the great miracle worker. As the parents continued in their sorcery, which had joy and praise, it wasn't as favorable for Nicky's childhood. Instead, his childhood was filled with fear and anger. The family was a large one too, which would mean that there was very little attention for each child, 18 siblings. Nicky was bitter about his father and mother, and was scared of the witchcraft that would happen each night. One time, Nicky stole from his mother's purse, and his father caught him and put him in the pigeon house. You can stay in with the birds until you learn your lesson. He would shove him through the door and slam it. He would hammer against the door and kick it, though the birds would smash against him and the wall of the shack. They would peck his face and neck. He fell down to the filthy floor, trying to protect his eyes and shut out the sound of the birds. Nicky was just with the birds. After what seemed like forever, his father would return to open the door and drag him into the yard. His resentment against his parents would still carry on. One other summer afternoon, Nicky's mother and several other mediums were sitting and drinking coffee in the living room. Nicky had grown tired of playing with his brother and decided to play on his own by bouncing a small ball on the floor. One of the mediums commented on Nicky and how adorable he looks. The mother would respond with a song. In this song, she would say that he was never her son and declare him to be a child of Satan. Nicky was in tears. She would then cry out, "Get out, devil! Get away from me!" He would run to his room, filled with tears. He would then come back to the living room, screaming. The boy smashed his hands against the table. He would then run outside and push his two younger brothers aside and ran to his hiding spot. He would be under the porch. Nicky would hear his mother and the mediums laugh. "See, I told you he is Satan's child." Nicky's father would see Nicky hiding and asked, "What are you doing under there, boy?" Nicky would remain silent, and the father would go back inside, acting as if he had never asked. Soon, the laughter of Nicky's father joined in too with the women. They were all laughing, all of them. No one cares. No one cares. Nicky was in tears and cried, "I hate you, Mom! I hate you!" Nicky would collapse to the ground and fell into a tortured sleep. Nicky's father would go outside and find his son. His father would instruct him to wash up and join in for supper, without taking any account of what Nicky has been feeling. Nicky would obey, but he would never love again. It is a common practice for Puerto Rican families to send their children to New York. 6 of Nicky's oldest brothers had already left and moved. They were all married and building a new life. Nicky was too young, but he put himself through so much trouble. His parents would even see that he couldn't even stay on the island either. Nicky would pick fights at school, and he was a complete rebel. He would hit a small girl with a rock, which would cause his father to slap him until his face bled. He would get into a fight with a teacher by insulting him, though he was helpless in this fight and said that he would run to the police. Instead, he went to his dad and wanted him to handle it. However, when they got there, the teacher was gone, and the dad would go to the principal to get to the bottom of this. After speaking, Nicky would be the one getting punished. As they were walking home, Nicky would run away. The dad didn't do anything, but he shouted that he would lash him. He would run pretty far, and he would end up in the inland mountains, but after 3 days the police caught him and sent him home. When he was home, the dad did as he said he would. Nicky would run 5 times away from his family over the next 2 years. Soon, The mother, out of desperation, would write a letter to her son in New York, Frank, and asked if Nicky could go with him. Frank would agree to this, and Nicky would leave the island. It was an emotional time for him to depart, and the parents do finally get along a little. The father would call Nicky a little bird that was legendary on the island, and that bird had no legs. The bird is tiny and light and continues on the wing. He is restless. Nicky was assigned to the pilot's custody when he would reach New York, until his brother would arrive. But he would run away from the airport. The gate guards would try to stop him, but he would run away to a bus where he would secretly get on, and found himself in a city of 8 million people. He would spend the money that his dad gave him to buy 2 hot dogs and a chili. He was on his own. He was walking in the streets alone, despite passing by crowds. 2 police officers would soon find him on his own in the middle of the night and helped him out. They would dial his brother in a phone booth, and Nicky was able to make it to Frank's apartment in less than an hour. He is now safe, but something would tell him that he would never stay. He may run away again. He may run away again.